In the early 2010s, there's no niche horror title that had a stronger chokehold than the Amnesia series, mostly due in part to now the giants and forefathers of YouTube, PewDiePie, Markiplier, and Jacksepticeye. The newfound virality of the Let's Play format became intertwined with the horror genre, and put a spotlight on the dark horror title that Amnesia delivers upon, with a focus on atmosphere, clever storytelling, small puzzles, and the constant discomfort of the slow descent to insanity. After releasing 2 titles to success, frictional games would shift their focus from Amnesia and scaring the player to a horror title that was never about the horror. I'm Sin, and this is Soma. Soma doesn't open in a dark cellar or upon some grand mystery, but rather in the shoes of Simon Jarrett, a normal guy who's been struggling with a recent car crash. Half because, well, he lost his girlfriend in the crash, but also because his brain is still bleeding and he's slowly dying. The game opens on Simon waking up to receive a call from one David Munchie. Munchie is a leading researcher on some new brain scan tech, and Simon is going to be one of his new subjects in hopes of finding a solution to his terminal dilemma. The introduction doesn't truly kick off until after entering Munchie's offices and getting your brain scanned, in which you're magically transported to the distant future, far from some kind of utopia. In the halls of Pathos 2, the full effect and gameplay of Amnesia take place, as you work your way through corridors and halls using new tools and avoiding unseen horrors in the game's dense and rich atmosphere. You spend almost the entire game in complete silence and discomfort, whether it be shifting through halls, vents, mazes, or roaming across the seafloor. You find machines intertwined with organisms, dead bodies line the hallways, and monsters that hunt you, while you piece together what happened aboard the Pathos 2. None of this is new to either the horror genre or even this development team, because everything I've said so far can also be directly applicable to Amnesia. But that's also not what you walk away from this game remembering. It's the core story, the ideas, small details, and themes that are developing from the things that are left unsaid. The core story is told mostly through Catherine Chun, a researcher you meet along your journey. It's explained slowly through the story. You've been transported to the end of humanity. Catherine is the lead researcher on the ARC project. Using the same brain scan tech you had back in Toronto a century ago, they set a goal to transport everyone's consciousness onto a machine and send them off to space so the last of humanity can live in peace for all eternity. You find through logs and detailings that a comet had made impact a year prior. In that time, it has drastically changed the atmosphere of the planet, the surface of a large part of Earth, and wiped out nearly all life except those that lived at the bottom of the sea. The Ark became the only way that humanity would carry on as a species, and the people of Pathos 2 never succeed in their quest, and this becomes your end goal through speaking more with Catherine throughout the game. With the ever-shocking twist, as this carries on, is that you and Catherine aren't. As in, you're just scans of them that have been put into robots. It becomes very obvious when the communication tower collapses in on itself, and you survive the water pressure because you're a diving suit with the same black goop and electronics like the many piles of machines you found scattered around the facility so far. And meeting up with Catherine, you're actually forced to rescue her because she's as helpless as the rest of the fallen machines. And if it wasn't obvious yet, the real Simon Jarrett died who knows how many years ago. The protagonist you play as is a continuation of what was his consciousness on that day somewhere in Toronto. And the core theme is introduced in this of what makes a person a person. Where does identity and the morality of being human lie in your existence? All the way back in the 18th century, there was this paradox called the ship of Theseus. Maybe you've heard about it. It asks, if no pieces of the original made up the current ship, was it still the ship of Theseus? Furthermore, if it was no longer the same, when had it ceased existing as the original ship? This has been told in different formats. If I have a hatchet and I replace the head and then the handle separately, is it the same hatchet? At what point is this hatchet not the same hatchet? At what point is the ship no longer the same ship? And in Soma's case, if I replace your body in its entirety, are you the same person? How much does a fixed body weigh on the definition of being human? This thought is eased in as you meet the first living human in Pathos 2, and she's been mortally wounded in just a tragic accident, but tucked away from the facility, has been forced to live as the structural gel won't let her die. And to carry on, you have to allow her to die. Though technically, the gel hasn't replaced any of her body parts. It did remove her mortality. So the question becomes, can you be human without death? This goes a step further later in the game when you meet a robot with a human consciousness, the same as the human girl, stuck and mortally wounded. She refers herself as a person, same as you did at the start of the game, and you're left to wonder, when you turned off the robot, did you kill someone? You obviously felt bad the first time, but you thought you were likely doing the right thing. But this time, does it matter? Catherine, when rescued, gets transferred to your Omni tool. And what you realize over the course of the game is that whenever she's not plugged in, she's not conscious. But if you're just a consciousness in a tool, and you're repeatedly stopping and starting it, even if her memory stays, and her consciousness continues, are you technically killing her each time you unplug her? This same idea is pushed even further when you later go through the logs of people that have been scanned as you're prepping the Ark. And to get help, you need information. So you have to boot someone's consciousness into a virtual machine. And you repeatedly bring this person to exist, he freaks out, and you turn it off. Until the only way to speak to him is to augment Catherine as his partner and lie to him to get the info you need before releasing him again. You get the option after the fact to delete his file, so this doesn't have to happen again. But it doesn't make it feel any less humane repeatedly killing someone for information. This discomfort and psychological horror isn't infilled through being chased by the monsters you encounter, or the gameplay and mechanics that's ripped from Amnesia, but it's the perpetual push on the idea of one's own mortality and humanity. Similar to Amnesia, you spend most of this game in complete silence, alone. It builds the game's atmosphere, like most good horror games. But in Soma's case, it makes you sit in your own thoughts. The pauses between the monsters, Catherine, and the continued plot of saving humanity is weighed down by your own empathy. And none of this is by any means a mistake. Pathos 2, the name of the facility, is in reference to the persuasion technique Pathos, which loosely means pity. But the different sites in the game, Alpha, Theta, Delta, are Greek. So, more directly, it means suffering. Pathos is the English root for patient, the one who suffers. Pathogen, which is the one who generates suffering, and compassion, to share suffering with. There's a lot of biblical symbolism too. Obviously the Ark, named after Noah's. In Noah's Ark, it saved all the animals of Earth from a great disaster, a flood, while Catherine's Ark is saving the people from an asteroid, a comet. But it can also be seen as an ironic jab as a false Ark. It's juxtaposed in the setting, being built deep underwater, a contrarian retelling of Noah's Ark through the plot of the game. The identity of what the Ark itself symbolizes as an extension to one's life post-mortem is extremely reminiscent of a false heaven or a man-made afterlife. And this all becomes more morally concerning when you realize that you can't actually transfer one's consciousness. 3 times through the game's runtime do they make it clear you're only copying one's consciousness. The beginning, when you realize you're just a diving suit with a neurochip, and the real Simon Jarrett died probably decades ago. At the peak of the conflict and story, and you're forced to rebuild a new version of yourself, using a diving suit that's built for more water pressure, and roaming the various floors while being hunted and solving puzzles to retrieve structural gel, a battery to act as a heart, and a cortex chip to act as a brain, where you activate your new suit and it copies over your consciousness, and you're awoken to cries of confusion as your past self is unsure why he hasn't transferred over. You understandably, not realizing there will be 2 Simons, get upset, and you get the option to leave him behind or pull his plug. And again, in the final moments of the story, where everything comes to a head, as you load the Ark, you transfer yourself in suspense, and when the ship takes off, nothing changes. And as you lash out in frustration and confusion as some other Simon carries on the goal you spent all this time working toward, this same idea of salvation, Catherine just leaves you by yourself in the silent emptiness of accomplishing what you set out to do, as the credits roll in the tragic ending of your story. As a human being, we want to side with Catherine. We want to believe that it is us on the Ark, but there's this ever-sinking feeling it's not. That this ever-present goal through the entire story, this idea of saving humanity, is a misrepresentation of what you've actually done. You have to wonder, at the ends of the earth, how far you would go to carry on the human race. But at the same time, you have to ask yourself, in this situation, if what you are carrying out is human at all. And there's this ever-present sinking feeling that it's not. Life shouldn't be lived this way. This same idea is predicated right before you launch the Ark, where it's being stored by what is assumed to be the last human on Earth. She's hooked up to the same machines as every other machine, monster, and the only other human you've encountered to this point, but not by accident. She's remained here locked in a room, barely surviving, in constant misery and agony, guarding the Ark. She's doing so because right before the Ark was launched, there was a disagreement among the team. To this point, there have been clear outliers of people fully against this plan, and there's been strange strings of cultish members who would commit suicide after being scanned in the belief it would allow them to live truly as the single version of themselves in the Ark. And in the final moments of launching it, there's a disagreement. Catherine gets defensive, and one of her colleagues kills her by accident in the scuffle. Sarah Lindwall, the last human alive, locked herself away to protect the Ark. Handing it off, Sarah asks for one final request. Kill her. Let her die. This is no way to live. And begs you to unplug her and stay with her as she passes. But even in her final moments, she asks you to launch the Ark. To not let all this work and people's lives be wasted in the effort of salvation. This continued conflict of interest. This ever-hopeful idea of a man-made afterlife, the continuation of the human race, with no way to really grow out of this stagnated symbol of principle, and humanity actually dying out, as it should. It's no wonder why Soma still feels so viscerally important, even a decade later. It puts so much emphasis on its story, characters, world building, philosophical principles that make you think so much through its short runtime. yet leaves you so hollow in its resilient choice to not give you an answer, a win condition, or a book-ended conclusion. The atmosphere, monsters, puzzles, and design of Amnesia is baked in so well, not to scare you, but to make this journey feel so vast and to give purpose that resembles the human resilience that carries on at the ends of the earth. That launching this arc has some meaning, some kind of weight. It gives name to each person that was a part of Pathos 2. You get to read and listen to the turn and downfall of the last human survivors, each with their own questions, opinions, and beliefs on what they're working on, even down to the retelling of a mass suicide of a cult hell-bent on living for eternity among the team. Every body you encounter has a name attached to it, each with their own story. Each monster isn't just a monster spawned out of thin air, but a person from Pathos, mutated and mutilated, forced to stay alive by the same system that keeps you alive. The ever-present paradox that Soma sends you through feels wholly unique compared to everything else around this genre, because of its willingness to be so fucking bold, focusing on a human story that was never about the horror that it presents in the halls of Pathos 2, feeling less bent on being just a fucking horror title, but instead vests itself on being an interactive present story that forces player to infer ideas in a thought experiment as old as humans.